Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the unceded and unsurrendered traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. It's great to be here today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us as we mark an important milestone for the First Nations Finance Authority. As mentioned, my name is Rebecca Alty. I'm the Member of Parliament for the Northwest Territories and the Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations. I was born and raised in Yellowknife, still call it home. It's Treaty 8 territory, home of the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation and the North Slave Métis Alliance. Today I'm proud to be joined by Ernie Daniels, another fellow Northwest Territories resident. It's great to have two folks from the Northwest Territories getting to make this important announcement and celebration. Mr. Daniels is President and CEO of the First Nations Finance Authority, also known as the FNFA. To celebrate the FNFA's milestone of $4 billion in loans to over 100 First Nations. This is a remarkable achievement, and I want to congratulate everyone whose hard work has brought us to this moment. It's been 19 years since the First Nations Fiscal Management Act came into force, and thanks to the leadership and advocacy of First Nations across Canada, it continues to grow. Since then, the Act has grown into an incredibly successful, robust system that provides tools to help First Nations with fiscal management, taxation, and pooled borrowing. Through collaboration and co-development, it has been improved over time to better meet the needs of communities. It's that history of partnership and collaboration that we are here to celebrate today. Since the government passed the First Nations Fiscal Management Act in 2006, it has produced very impressive results. 357 First Nations are now included in the Act. 146 First Nations collect their own property taxes, generating annual revenues of more than $99 million. 225 First Nations have achieved the Financial Management Board certification. And perhaps most importantly, through this framework, the FNFA has become a trusted and capable lending institution. The loans that FNFA provides to First Nations have supported the creation of critical economic development opportunities, helped build essential community infrastructure, and produced thousands of good jobs. These investments enable First Nations to become partners and proponents. They build projects and they build futures, supporting education, health, well-being, and community prosperity. The benefits have been enormous. The Haisla Nation has been approved to borrow up to $1.4 billion to support their equity participation in the Cedar LNG project. The FNFA financed 7 Mi'kmaq First Nations who purchased a 50% equity stake in Clearwater Seafoods, which is the single largest investment in the industry by any Indigenous group. And Bechuawan First Nation acquired 100% ownership of the wind facility on the eastern edge of Lake Superior, buying out their partner with the support of a $216 million loan from the FNFA. And Henvey Inlet First Nation leveraged over $117 million to support their transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, namely through an investment in a 300 megawatt wind project that generates enough clean energy to power 100,000 homes. And as you're about to hear from Chief Epp, this has been a transformative impact at Chechen First Nation. Now, to add to this growing list of success stories, our government is proposing changes to the First Nations Fiscal Management Act through Budget 2025 that will unlock even more opportunity. By enabling the First Nation Financial Authority to lend to special purpose vehicles, we are increasing access to capital for Indigenous nations so they have the financing they need to take on equity in major projects. For Indigenous communities, this makes it easier for multiple nations to work together, borrow as a group, and lower administrative costs. This will also provide access to better borrowing rates and more opportunities to take equity in major projects. With improved access to financing, communities can create good jobs, grow local businesses, and build lasting prosperity for future generations. This is one of the ways we can build Canada strong in true partnership with Indigenous communities while increasing their financial independence and building long-term prosperity. Additionally, in Budget 2025, we're introducing a new bonding and surety pilot program that would remove a major barrier that has kept contractors from bidding on projects in their own communities. For too long, First Nation contractors have often been shut out of infrastructure projects and economic opportunities because of systemic barriers to accessing bonding and surety insurance. This pilot would provide the backing needed for First Nations contractors to bid on projects that require risk assurance. By making it easier to secure financial backing, this pilot would enable First Nations businesses to bid on more construction and infrastructure contracts, creating good jobs, spurring economic development, and driving prosperity in the process. I'm optimistic about what these initiatives mean for the future, but I know there's still more work ahead. Work that we will do in partnership with First Nations and Indigenous institutions like the FNFA. Again, I want to congratulate everyone who contributed to today's announcement. I look forward to continuing to sharing ideas and engaging in productive conversations. And I really want to thank the leadership who have come forward with a number of these recommendations, including the special purpose vehicles, the bonding and surety program. I really look forward to growing together in the future. Masi cho, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, thank you. Masi cho to the Algonquin peoples for welcoming us to your territory this week. Thank you, Minister Alty, for being here today to support our announcement and to support the self-determining efforts of our First Nations. My name is Ernie Daniels. I'm a Dene from the Salt River First Nation in the Northwest Territories, which is located in and around the town of Fort Smith, born and raised and educated in the Northwest Territories. And I'm also president and CEO of the First Nations Finance Authority. Today we celebrate not just a milestone, but a bold step forward on the path to meaningful economic reconciliation. Recently, FNFA passed a milestone where we have successfully raised over $4 billion through the capital markets for investment into nation-building projects. The impact has created an estimated 39,000 jobs and contributed $8.5 billion to Canada's economy. So who buys this? Who buys our debt? Who buys our bonds? Well, it's international investors from around the world. We have central banks from many countries that buy First Nation bonds. We have U.S. institutional investors that are buying our bonds and Canadian investors as well. So the access to the capital market is there. It's what we created and what we actually are very, very proud of. For too long, outdated and inequitable structures under the Indian Act have limited First Nations' ability to fully exercise self-determination. Our communities want to change that narrative, and through the recent Budget 25 announcement, we have an opportunity to replace some colonial frameworks with innovative solutions that level the playing field and empower First Nations to choose their own path. Access to affordable capital is critical for First Nations to advance their priorities, to help close the $350 billion infrastructure gap, and to participate in economic opportunities and create meaningful change for our future. When First Nations succeed, Canada succeeds. Investment into Indigenous communities strengthens our economy, creates jobs, and contributes positively to Canada's GDP. FNFA is a First Nation-led, not-for-profit organization operating under the First Nation Fiscal Management Act. Today, nearly 400 of Canada's 634 First Nations have voluntarily joined the Fiscal Management Act. We are the only First Nation-led organization in the world leveraging private capital from international markets through a pool borrowing model. Budget 25 signals a historic shift. Amendments to the First Nation Fiscal Management Act will allow the FNFA to lend to Indigenous-owned special purpose vehicles, expanding access to affordable capital and for major economic and resource projects. Canada's intention to explore a bonding and surety backstop pilot for First Nation contractors, enabling competitive bidding on projects. And also Canada's intention to consider a monetization pilot for federal transfers, which will unlock financing for on-reserve infrastructure. People often ask why I do this work. Good question, right? The answer is simple: to improve the quality of life for our people. These legislative changes make a brighter, more prosperous future possible, not just for today, but for generations to come. FNFA is ready to work in true partnership with Canada, to finalize the amendments and pilots, work together to unlock Canada's future with First Nations as equal economic and treaty partners. The time is now. Masi Cho, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ernie and Minister Alty. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of the First Nations Finance Authority in my capacity as chair. I really want to acknowledge the unceded and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. My name is Wilelik. My given name is Derek Epp. I'm the chief of Chiactal, also known as Chiacton First Nation. It's a tough one. Yeah, no worries. Really honored to be here. We're about 100 kilometers east of Vancouver, on the west coast of British Columbia, situated in a municipality called City of Chilliwack. And again, really honored to be here as the board chair. And on behalf of the board, we really want to applaud Canada for recognizing the need for the FNFA to increase its ability to become the lender of choice for First Nations. You know, my community of Chiactal is one of those communities that have really accessed a lot of the First Nations Finance Authorities, access to capital, and it's proven successful for my nation, including all the tools of the FMA framework. And it's really enabled my community to live out the vision of our members, and being able to work in partnership with the FNFA has enabled us to use our revenue streams in a much more productive manner and really begin to close our own infrastructure gaps. And we've done several projects in partnership with the FNFA, including housing. You know, it's so critical that we're providing housing and affordable housing for our membership, and really proud of the work we've been able to do over the last, 4 or 5 years in building out 37 units of affordable housing for our members in partnership with the Finance Authority. And the impacts that we see are vast, everything from our elders to our families, and being able to hear the stories of our elders. And I got to sit with them and interview them after we built some of our units and hear the stories of, we moved one home from about 45 minutes outside of our community, and she shared the simple message of being cozy, feeling home, feeling welcome again, and being able to attend and be close to our longhouse and be close to our family, and being able to pass down those traditions and cultures to our next generation, and also providing space for our young families to grow up in a healthy environment, to be surrounded by our support networks that we provide in our community, and begin to really capitalize on our economic prosperity and be able to give back into our membership's lives. And that's really because of the capability of accessing funding through the First Nations Finance Authority. You know, and we see, well, in Budget 2025, it includes some difficult cuts, and we get that it'll impact First Nations and Canadians alike. But, it also brings forward an investment that opens the door to new opportunities for our communities. I've been doing this for almost a decade in this role, and I can see that the access to affordable capital is not just an economic tool. It's a foundation for the overall health and well-being of our nations. And I've lived and breathed that. It creates the conditions for growth, innovation, and long-term success. And most importantly, it ensures that Indigenous communities are not left on the sidelines, but are active participants and leaders in shaping Canada's future. I can say from an example in my community and the work that I've been able to do with the City of Chilliwack, because of our access to infrastructure, access to capital, and our ability to close my own community's infrastructure gap by leveraging funds through the FNFA, we've had a different relationship now. So much so we're now providing infrastructure to the residents of the city of Chilliwack through residential, through commercial, through recreation, and now we're looking to co-design what the city looks like with public schools, public infrastructure, residential and commercial aspects that meets the needs of not just my membership, but the general public of the City of Chilliwack. And it's really exciting to be a part of this process and this shift. And these amendments that we're looking at are just a step in that direction as well. So we're so grateful that Canada has seen the value in expanding the FNFA's ability to lend to more Indigenous groups by amending the First Nations Fiscal Management Act so we can lend to special purpose vehicles. It's critical. I just finished a two-year negotiations for a board called Stonnesecate, where we negotiated a 12.5% stake for $736 million investment in an asset that was owned by Enbridge. It's a liquid natural gas pipeline. We brought together 38 communities in BC to participate in this transaction. And it's unprecedented. And we know if we're able to access funding through the FNFA, through a special purpose vehicle, more revenues can stay in community because we have access to competitive capital. And it's so integral because then we reinvest those funds back into infrastructure and back into our members, and it in turn stimulates the local economy as well. Furthermore, it's Canada's intention to explore the surety and bonding pilot will address and work to alleviate systemic inequalities, allowing contractors on reserve to bid on projects that are building in our communities. I have several members who would benefit from this as well, and being able to tap into those contracts would open up different doors in all of our members' lives as well. Finally, the intended pilot project for Canada to explore the monetization of federal transfers will work to address housing and infrastructure needs and support First Nations, all while creating jobs and stimulating the Canadian economy and contributing to our collective GDP. I like to give the example of my nation. We, 15, 20 years ago, it's funny you mentioned 19 years ago that the FNFA and these FMA tools were initiated. My community at that time was 90% dependent on federal transfers. Now you fast forward the clock 20 years and utilizing these tools and the capital that we've been able to access to the Finance Authority, we are now 90% own source revenue, 10% federal transfers. And I will never say we're dependent. It's flow through dollars that we're entitled to. I give the example of our local municipality, the city of Chilliwack, is 17% dependent on federal transfers, never mind the provincial transfers that we're not entitled to. And that's not a jab at the city of Chilliwack, it's the reality. It's the reality of what these tools enable our nations to do. Our nations are becoming self-sufficient and closing our own infrastructure gaps. And if you look at all the monetization work and what it can do to close the $350 billion infrastructure gap quicker and build for less today. And it's so important that we really focus in on these high impact, low cost, and these initiatives will unleash Indigenous capital and investments rooted in true partnership between the Canadian government and the Indigenous rights and title holders. We appreciate this opportunity to complete this important work, and we are ready to implement this in partnership with Canada today. So thank you a lot for allowing me to share a few words and a bit of my perspective.
Thank you. As there's no question online or on the floor, maybe I have one question for you. My name is Valérie Gamache from Radio-Canada. You talk about this pilot project in the budget. Can you give us an example of what can be accomplished in this pilot project? Is there any specific example you can give us?
For the insurance or for the
Bonding and surety.
the bonding and surety? Well, I can give you a number of examples, but one for sure that's really close to us. All this work that's going on with the Parliament buildings right now, First Nations want to participate in that. They want to be able to bid on a contract, but they have to work as subcontractors under companies that can afford the bonding insurance that's required for that. So it is a big barrier, especially for contractors that are on reserves. And we got in the budget, there's going to be tenders for defense spending and projects that are tenders that are going to go out. And so we want to be a part of that. First Nation contractors want to be a part of that. Because on the flip side, not only does it reach the target of 5%, but it also contributes to the economy. So jobs are going to be created from within the Indigenous population. So that's the best example I could give is the work that's being done here at Parliament.
Now, if I could maybe add too, is there is a number of projects that are happening on reserve, whether it's schools or health centers or water and sewer infrastructure. And so this is a project on reserve. But if there was a contractor who wants to bid on that and their business is on reserve, they're not able to get the bonding and surety because of the Indian Act. There's a clause. And so that contractor would then have to go buy real estate in, for example, the city of Chilliwack instead of being on reserve. And so this is about one of the chiefs in the Northwest Territories was talking about using the whole moose. And so it's if there's money coming to the reserve for water infrastructure somebody who lives on reserve should be able to bid for that. And then they should be able to get that and hire people on reserve to work on that project. So it's really about keeping more money, creating more jobs on reserve.
Thank you very much. C'est conclut cette conférence de presse.
This brings our press conference to an end.
You come and see us today. Thank you.
Merci.